The summer sun was setting as Staff Sergeant Mike Anderson pulled his old Ford pickup truck into the Silent Creek gas station. He had been driving for almost 10 hours straight, heading home after attending his younger sister's wedding in Ohio. His dark blue Army uniform was wrinkled from the long drive, but he still wore it with pride. After 15 years in the Army and 3 tours in Afghanistan, the uniform felt like a second skin to him. The gas station was located on a quiet stretch of highway, surrounded by thick forests on both sides. As Mike parked near pump number 4, he noticed 6 large motorcycles parked in front of the store. Their chrome parts gleamed in the evening light, and loud rock music was playing from somewhere nearby. Just a quick stop, Mike thought to himself. He needed to use the bathroom, grab some coffee, and fill up his truck before continuing the last 3 hours of his journey to Fort Bragg. His muscles were stiff from sitting too long, and his eyes felt heavy with tiredness. After filling up his truck, Mike grabbed his wallet and walked towards the store. Near the entrance, he saw 4 rough-looking men in leather vests sitting on a wooden bench. They were drinking beer and laughing loudly. Empty beer cans were scattered around their feet, and the smell of cigarette smoke hung in the air. The bikers gave Mike dirty looks as he walked past them. One of them spat on the ground near his boots, but Mike ignored it. Years of military training had taught him to stay calm and avoid unnecessary trouble. Inside the store, he nodded politely to the elderly cashier, a thin man with gray hair who looked nervous as he watched the bikers through the window. "Bathroom key?" Mike asked quietly. "Around back, son," the cashier replied, pointing to a door at the side of the building. "It's unlocked. Be careful, though. Those fellas out there have been causing trouble all evening. I already called the sheriff, but it'll be another 30 minutes before anyone gets here." Mike thanked him and bought a large coffee. As he walked towards the bathroom, he could feel the bikers watching him. His combat instincts, sharpened by years of dangerous missions, told him something wasn't right. The way the men were looking at him, their body language, the fact that there were 6 bikes but only 4 men visible, it all set off warning bells in his head. The bathroom was around the corner of the building, hidden from view of the store's front. It was a single room with old yellow walls and flickering fluorescent lights. Mike closed the door behind him and quickly checked the small window, too small for a person to climb through, which meant only one way in or out. He had just finished washing his hands when he heard heavy footsteps outside. The door handle turned slowly, and Mike's body automatically shifted into a defensive stance. His mind was now fully alert, all traces of tiredness gone. 15 years of military training had taught him to be ready for anything. The bathroom door opened, and 3 large men stepped inside. They were wearing the same leather vests as the bikers outside, with patches showing they belonged to a local motorcycle gang. The biggest one, who had a long gray beard and tattoos covering his arms, gave Mike an ugly smile. "Well, look what we got here, boys," the bearded man said, cracking his knuckles. "A little soldier boy, all alone." Mike stayed silent, his eyes calmly studying each man. He noticed their stance, their build, the way they moved. 2 were carrying knives in their belt sheaths. The third had brass knuckles partly hidden in his vest pocket. They had positioned themselves to block the door, an amateur mistake that told Mike they were used to fighting scared civilians, not trained soldiers. "You boys might want to think carefully about your next move," Mike said quietly, his voice steady and controlled. He placed his coffee cup carefully on the sink counter, his movements slow and deliberate. The bikers laughed, not understanding that Mike's calm voice wasn't a sign of fear. It was a final warning. They had no idea that they were about to learn a very painful lesson about judging people by their appearance. The bearded biker took a step forward, his boots making heavy sounds on the dirty bathroom floor. He was at least 6 feet tall and probably weighed close to 300 pounds. His 2 friends moved to either side, creating a half circle around Mike. The small bathroom suddenly felt even smaller. "You know what we do to military types around here?" The bearded man growled, pulling out a switchblade from his pocket. The blade clicked open, reflecting the dim bathroom light. "We teach them some respect." Mike didn't move. His mind was already calculating distances, angles, and potential moves, just like he'd been trained to do. He noticed that the biker on the left was favoring his right leg slightly, probably from an old injury. The one on the right was breathing heavily, out of shape. The leader in the middle was strong but slow, based on how he moved. "Last chance," Mike said calmly, his hands relaxed at his sides. Walk away now, and we can all go home without any trouble." The bearded biker laughed, showing yellow teeth. "Look at this guy trying to act tough. What you gonna do, soldier boy? Call in an airstrike?" Without warning, the biker on the right lunged forward, trying to grab Mike's shirt. It was exactly the kind of amateur move Mike had expected. In one smooth motion, Mike stepped slightly to the left, letting the attacker's momentum carry him forward. As the biker stumbled past, Mike's elbow came down precisely on the back of his neck. Not hard enough to cause serious damage, but enough to send him crashing face first into the bathroom wall. The bearded leader's eyes widened in surprise. He hadn't expected Mike to move so fast. Before he could react, Mike had already stepped into his personal space. The big biker swung his knife in a wild arc, but Mike was no longer there. Years of close-quarters combat training took over. Mike caught the knife hand at the wrist, twisted sharply, and applied pressure to exactly the right point. The blade clattered to the floor as the biker leader howled in pain. In the same fluid movement, Mike kicked the knife away under one of the stalls. The third biker pulled out his brass knuckles and threw a heavy punch at Mike's head. Mike ducked under it easily. The punch was telegraphed so clearly that he could have seen it coming from a mile away. The biker's fist hit the bathroom mirror instead, cracking it and sending glass shards tinkling to the floor. Mike had been in enough real fights to know that you don't give your opponents time to regroup. He drove his knee into the bearded leader's stomach, causing the big man to double over, gasping for air. Then he grabbed the third biker's extended arm and used the man's own momentum to slam him into his leader. Both men crashed into the bathroom stall doors with a loud bang. The first biker, who had hit the wall, was trying to get up. Mike placed his boot firmly on the man's back, applying just enough pressure to keep him down. "Stay down," he ordered in his command voice, the same tone he'd used to control chaotic situations in combat zones. "It'll hurt less that way." Just then, the bathroom door burst open. The other three bikers from outside rushed in, having heard the commotion. They stopped dead in their tracks at the scene before them. Their three friends were on the ground or slumped against the stalls, while Mike stood calmly in the center of the bathroom, looking completely unruffled. "Anyone else want to try their luck?" Mike asked quietly, shifting his weight slightly to face the newcomers. His stance was relaxed but ready, his eyes alert and focused. The three new bikers looked at each other uncertainly. They had expected to find their friends beating up a lone soldier. Instead, they found their toughest fighters taken down in less than a minute. The tallest of the new arrivals raised his hand slowly. "Look, man, we don't want any more trouble," he said, backing away towards the door. "We're just gonna get our friends and go." Mike nodded but didn't relax his guard. "That sounds like a smart decision. Help them up and leave. But remember this the next time you think about jumping someone. You never know who they might be." The elderly cashier watched through the store window as the six bikers helped each other to their motorcycles. The bearded leader was holding his right wrist, his face red with pain and embarrassment. Another had a bloody nose, and a third was walking with a noticeable limp. None of them looked back at the gas station as they started their bikes and roared away into the growing darkness. Mike walked calmly back into the store, picked up his now cold coffee from the counter, and bought a fresh one. His uniform was still neat, without a single wrinkle added from the fight. Only a small cut on his knuckle showed that anything had happened at all. "Son," the cashier said, his voice shaking slightly, "I've never seen anything like that in my 30 years running this store. Are you okay? Should I call an ambulance?" Mike smiled kindly at the old man. "No need for an ambulance, sir. Nobody's seriously hurt. Those men just needed to learn a lesson about respecting others." He paused to take a sip of his coffee. "But you might want to call the sheriff again and let them know what happened. I'll wait here to give my statement." The cashier nodded and reached for the phone. While he made the call, two other customers who had been hiding in the back of the store came forward. One was a young mother with her teenage son, and the other was a truck driver who had been buying snacks when the trouble started. "That was amazing," the teenage boy said, his eyes wide with excitement. "Are all soldiers trained to fight like that?" Mike shook his head. "We're trained to protect and serve, not to fight. What happened today wasn't about fighting. It was about stopping trouble before it got worse. The best victories are the ones where everyone walks away and learns something." The mother stepped forward, clutching her purse tightly. "Those men have been terrorizing this area for months," she said. "Nobody dared to stand up to them. They've scared away so many customers that Mr. Johnson here was thinking of selling the store. The cashier, Mr. Johnson, hung up the phone and nodded sadly. Sheriff's on his way. Should be here in about 10 minutes. He looked at Mike with grateful eyes. Those bikers used to come here every weekend, scaring people, stealing stuff, causing trouble. I couldn't do anything about it. I'm just an old man trying to run my business. 20 minutes later, Sheriff Dan Wilson arrived in his patrol car. He was a tall, lean man with gray hair at his temples and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He took statements from everyone present and watched the security camera footage that Mr. Johnson had saved. "Well, Staff Sergeant Anderson," the sheriff said, closing his notebook, "looks like a clear case of self-defense to me. Those men have been a problem in 3 counties, but they've always managed to avoid serious charges. Maybe this time they'll think twice before causing trouble." Mike nodded respectfully. "I hope so, sir. Sometimes people need to learn the hard way that their actions have consequences." The young truck driver, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "Hey, soldier, I saw the whole thing through the store window. The way you handled yourself in there, it was like watching a professional boxer, except more controlled. Where did you learn to fight like that?" Mike's eyes grew distant for a moment, remembering years of training and real-world experience. "It's not about fighting," he explained. "In the Army, we learn to handle situations. Sometimes that means combat, but more often it means knowing how to prevent combat. Today, those men expected violence, but what they got was a lesson in consequences." The sheriff finished writing his report and handed Mike his card. "If those bikers give you any trouble about this, you call me directly," but somehow he smiled. "I don't think they'll be bothering anyone around here for a while." As the evening grew darker, people started leaving the gas station. The young mother thanked Mike again. The teenager asked for a selfie, which Mike politely declined, and Mr. Johnson insisted on giving him free coffee for life. The next morning, Mike's story started spreading through the local community. Mr. Johnson's nephew had posted the security camera footage on social media, and it quickly went viral. The video showed how calmly and professionally Mike had handled the situation without causing any serious injuries to the bikers. Local news reporters started calling the gas station, asking for interviews. Mr. Johnson politely declined to share Mike's personal information, respecting the soldiers' privacy. But he did tell them about how the bikers had been troubling his business for months, and how one trained soldier had solved the problem in less than 5 minutes. Meanwhile, at a small diner 30 miles away from the gas station, the 6 bikers were having a very different morning. They sat at a corner table, nursing their bruised bodies and wounded pride. Their leader, Big Jake, still couldn't move his wrist properly from where Mike had twisted it. "We need to do something about this," said Razor, the biker with the brass knuckles. His hand was wrapped in bandages from punching the mirror. "We can't let people think we're weak." Big Jake shook his head slowly. "No," he said, surprising everyone at the table. "We're not doing anything." He looked at his beaten crew and sighed. "That soldier, he could have really hurt us if he wanted to. But he didn't. He just taught us a lesson." The other bikers stared at their leader in shock. Big Jake had never backed down from a fight in his 20 years of leading the gang. But something about last night had changed him. "You know what bothers me the most?" Big Jake continued, stirring his coffee with his good hand. "When I was young, I served in the Marines for 2 years. Then I got into trouble, got discharged, and ended up like this." He gestured at his leather vest and the gang patches. "That soldier last night, he reminded me of what I could have been if I'd stayed on the right path." Back at the gas station, business was unusually busy. Word had spread about what happened, and people were no longer afraid to stop there. Mr. Johnson had to call his daughter to help him handle all the customers who came in, many of them just to talk about the incident. Around noon, a surprise visitor walked into the store. It was a man in his 60s, wearing a neat suit and carrying a business card that identified him as a reporter from the local newspaper. He introduced himself to Mr. Johnson. "I'm not here just for the story about last night," the reporter explained. "I'm a Vietnam veteran myself, and I wanted to write about how military training isn't just about fighting. It's about protecting people and handling difficult situations professionally." Mr. Johnson shared what he could, carefully leaving out any personal details about Mike. He described how the soldier had given the bikers every chance to walk away, how he had used only the force necessary to stop the threat, and how he had stayed to give his statement to the police. As the reporter was leaving, a group of young men entered the store. They were local teenagers who used to avoid the gas station because of the bikers. Now they felt safe to come back. "Mr. Johnson," one of them asked, "is it true that the soldier took down 6 bikers by himself?" The old cashier smiled and shook his head. "No, boys. He didn't take down 6 bikers. He showed 6 men that their actions have consequences, and he did it without causing any permanent harm. That's what real strength is about." By evening, the story had reached the local military base. The commanding officer, Colonel Roberts, watched the security footage in his office. He nodded approvingly at Mike's handling of the situation: perfect control, minimal force, and professional conduct throughout. He made a note to mention this incident in the next staff meeting as an example of how soldiers should conduct themselves off duty. The gas station's regular customers noticed another change that day. The for sale sign that had been in Mr. Johnson's window for the past month was gone. When asked about it, the old man smiled and said, "Sometimes all it takes is one person standing up for what's right to change everything." 3 days after the incident, Big Jake sat alone in his small apartment, looking at an old photo album. His bandaged wrist was healing, but something deeper had changed inside him. The photo in his hands showed a younger version of himself in a crisp Marine uniform, standing proud at graduation. That was 15 years ago, before everything went wrong. The encounter with Mike had awakened something in him that he thought was long dead: his sense of honor. He picked up his phone and made a call he never thought he would make. "Hey, Tommy," he said to his son, whom he hadn't spoken to in 5 years. "It's Dad. I know I messed up, but I'd like to talk, if you're willing." Meanwhile, at Fort Bragg, Mike was surprised to find Colonel Roberts waiting at his office. The colonel held up a tablet showing the viral video from the gas station. "Staff Sergeant Anderson," Colonel Roberts said with a slight smile, "it seems you become quite famous in Virginia." He placed the tablet on the desk. "I've received calls from 3 different news stations wanting to interview you about how military training can be used responsibly in civilian situations." Mike stood at attention. "Sir, I was just trying to get home without any trouble." "At ease, Anderson," the colonel replied. "You did exactly what we train our soldiers to do. You showed restraint, gave clear warnings, and used minimal force to control the situation. But there's something else you should know." The colonel handed Mike a letter. It was from Mr. Johnson, the gas station owner. The old man had written to the base commander praising Mike's actions and explaining how one soldier's professional conduct had helped restore peace to their small community. Back at the gas station, things were changing. Mr. Johnson had hired 2 high school students to help him run the store, something he'd been afraid to do before because of the bikers. One of them was Tommy, Big Jake's son, who needed a part-time job while attending community college. That afternoon, something unexpected happened. Big Jake walked into the store alone. He wasn't wearing his biker vest, just a plain work shirt. The store went quiet as he approached the counter where Mr. Johnson stood. "Sir," Big Jake said, his voice rough but sincere, "I came to apologize. What I did. It wasn't right. That soldier made me remember something I'd forgotten. That strength isn't about intimidating people. It's about protecting them." Mr. Johnson studied the big man's face, seeing genuine regret in his eyes. "Apology accepted," he said finally. Then he looked over at Tommy, who was stocking shelves, pretending not to listen. "Family is the most important thing we have. Sometimes we all need a reminder of that." Big Jake turned and saw his son. Their eyes met for a moment, and though no words were spoken, something passed between them, a small spark of hope for rebuilding what was broken. Later that evening, Mike received another surprise. A letter arrived from the local sheriff's department. Inside was a handwritten note from Sheriff Wilson. "Thought you'd want to know. Big Jake and his crew turned themselves in for some outstanding warrants. But more importantly, Jake's enrolled in a veterans support group and is working to turn his life around. Sometimes the best fights are the ones that change lives instead of ending them. Thank you for showing us that." At the base, Colonel Roberts used the security footage in a training session for new recruits. "This," he explained, "is what we mean by being a soldier 24 hours a day. Staff Sergeant Anderson didn't just defend himself, he showed mercy, professionalism, and the kind of judgment we expect from our best soldiers. The recruits watched carefully as the video showed Mike giving the bikers multiple chances to walk away. One young recruit raised his hand. "Sir, why didn't he just knock them all out? He clearly could have." The colonel paused the video, because a true soldier's greatest weapon isn't his fists or his fighting skills. It's his judgment. Staff Sergeant Anderson didn't just win a fight, he changed lives that day. And he did it by remembering that every person, even an enemy, deserves a chance to make better choices. 2 months after the gas station incident, Mike was driving the same route again. He needed to make another trip to Ohio to help his sister move into her new house. As he approached the familiar gas station, he decided to stop for coffee, curious to see how things had changed. The difference was remarkable. The old building had a fresh coat of paint, and bright flowers grew in new planters near the entrance. The parking lot was full of cars, and a "Now Hiring" sign hung in the window. Mike smiled as he parked his truck next to a shiny motorcycle, not a gang bike, but a respectable Harley-Davidson with veteran plates. Inside, the store was buzzing with activity. Mr. Johnson was behind the counter, showing a new employee how to use the cash register. When he saw Mike, his face lit up with recognition. "Well, look who's back," the old man called out cheerfully. "Tommy, come see who's here." A young man in a store uniform came out from the stockroom. Mike noticed he had the same strong build as Big Jake, but his face was younger and carried none of the hardness his father's had shown. "Sir," Tommy said, extending his hand to Mike, "I've been hoping to meet you. You're the soldier who changed my dad's life." Before Mike could respond, the bell above the door chimed. Big Jake himself walked in, wearing clean work clothes with a construction company logo. He stopped short when he saw Mike, his expression a mix of surprise and embarrassment. "Staff Sergeant Anderson," Big Jake said formally, using Mike's rank. "I was hoping I'd get to see you again." He straightened his back, almost standing at attention, a glimpse of his military past showing through. Mike studied the man before him. The angry biker was gone, replaced by someone who looked more like the Marine he'd once been. "How's the wrist?" Mike asked with a slight smile. "Healed up fine," Big Jake replied, then added seriously, "but the real healing was somewhere else. After that night, I finally faced some truths about myself, started attending VA meetings, reconnected with Tommy here, even got a steady job in construction." Mr. Johnson brought over coffee for everyone, and they sat at the small table near the window. The old cashier had installed it recently, part of his plan to make the store more welcoming. "The other guys from my crew," Big Jake continued. "They'd made changes too. Razor went back to school. He's learning to be an auto mechanic. 2 others moved away to make fresh starts. The last one joined me at the construction company." Tommy spoke up, pride clear in his voice. "Dad's even helping coach Little League now. The same kids who used to run away when they saw him coming now high-five him at games." Mike listened, sipping his coffee thoughtfully. "Sometimes all people need is a wake-up call," he said. "A chance to remember who they really are." Just then, Sheriff Wilson walked in. He'd made it a habit to stop by the gas station regularly, though these days it was just to enjoy a coffee and chat with the regulars. He joined their table, adding his own observations about how the community had changed. "Crime's down 40% in this area," the sheriff reported. "Other store owners tell me they feel safer, and it all started because one soldier decided to handle a bad situation the right way." Mike shook his head modestly. "I just did what I was trained to do. The real heroes are the people who choose to change their lives for the better." He looked meaningfully at Big Jake. As the afternoon sun streamed through the window, more customers came and went. Some were locals who now used the gas station as a meeting place. Others were travelers stopping for refreshments. All of them noticed the positive atmosphere that had replaced the tension of the past. Before Mike left to continue his journey, Big Jake asked him one last question. "That night, you could have really hurt us if you wanted to. Why didn't you?" Mike adjusted his uniform cap and smiled. "Because sometimes the strongest thing you can do is show mercy. It gives people a chance to find their way back to who they're meant to be." 6 months had passed since Mike's chance reunion at the gas station. On a crisp autumn morning, he received an unexpected invitation in his mail at Fort Bragg. It was from the small Virginia town where the gas station was located. They wanted him to be the guest of honor at their annual Community Heroes Day celebration. Mike's first instinct was to politely decline. He had never sought recognition for his actions that night. But when he saw that the letter was signed by both Sheriff Wilson and Mr. Johnson, he reconsidered. Colonel Roberts encouraged him to attend, seeing it as a positive example of military-civilian relationships. The celebration was scheduled for a Saturday in October. As Mike drove into town, he barely recognized the area around the gas station. What had once been a troubled spot was now a thriving community hub. The station itself had expanded, adding a small diner section where travelers and locals could sit and eat. The parking lot had been transformed into a festival space. Colorful banners hung between light poles, and families walked around various booths and displays. Mike spotted Big Jake manning a grill, cooking hamburgers while wearing an apron that said Community BBQ Master. "There he is," Mr. Johnson called out as Mike parked his truck. The old cashier looked younger somehow, energized by the positive changes in his business and community. He was wearing a clean button-up shirt with an event organizer badge. Tommy rushed forward to greet Mike, now wearing a community college jacket. "Sir, you won't believe what's happened since you were here last," he said excitedly. "We started a youth mentoring program. Dad and some of his former crew members teach kids about motorcycle maintenance and auto repair. Keeps them off the streets." Sheriff Wilson approached, accompanied by a news reporter from the county paper. "This whole area's different now," the sheriff explained to the reporter. "What happened that night wasn't just about stopping trouble. It was about showing people a better way to handle conflicts." The reporter seemed especially interested in how one incident had sparked such widespread change. She interviewed several local residents who shared their stories. A teenage girl talked about how she no longer feared walking to the gas station for snacks after school. An elderly couple mentioned how they'd made friends with Big Jake at his community BBQs. A young mother described how the former bikers now helped patrol the school zones as crossing guards. The ceremony itself was simple but meaningful. Mayor Thompson, a short woman with gray hair and kind eyes, presented Mike with a Community Champion Award. But what touched Mike most was the speech Big Jake gave afterward. "6 months ago, I was a different person," Big Jake said, his voice rough with emotion. "I thought strength meant making people fear you. Then I met a soldier who showed me what real strength looks like. It's not about winning fights. It's about having the courage to change." As the crowd applauded, Mike noticed something remarkable. Mixed among the families and local residents were several familiar faces, the other bikers from that night. Like Big Jake, they had transformed. Razor was wearing his auto mechanic uniform, having just come from work. 2 others were helping organize the children's games. During the community lunch that followed, Mike sat with Mr. Johnson and his family. The old cashier's daughter Sarah, who now helped manage the expanded business, shared their future plans. "We're turning the empty lot next door into a community center," she explained. "Big Jake and his friends are helping with the construction. We'll have after-school programs, job training, and a veterans support group." As the afternoon wound down, Sheriff Wilson pulled Mike aside for a private word. "You know, son," he said, "in 30 years of law enforcement, I've learned that most people who cause trouble are just lost. Sometimes they just need someone to show them a different path." Mike looked around at the happy faces, the transformed community, and the former troublemakers who had become its pillars. He thought about how a simple gas station stop had turned into something so much more. "The Army taught me that our greatest victories aren't on battlefields," Mike replied. "They're in the moments when we help others find their way back to their best selves." 1 year after the original incident, Mike found himself once again assigned to give a special presentation at Fort Bragg. This time, he wasn't just teaching combat techniques. He was sharing a more important lesson about how military training could positively impact civilian life. The training room was packed with young soldiers. On the screen behind Mike played the famous gas station security footage, but today it was accompanied by new videos showing the transformed community. Colonel Roberts sat in the back, watching proudly as his staff sergeant addressed the group. "Many of you have probably seen this video," Mike began, gesturing to the screen. "But what you haven't seen is what happened afterward. This isn't just a story about stopping troublemakers. It's about understanding that our training isn't just for combat. It's for making the world better." As Mike spoke, the door opened quietly. Big Jake entered, wearing a clean suit, followed by Sheriff Wilson. They had been invited as guest speakers to share their perspectives on that night's events. "A year ago, I was the bad guy in this story," Big Jake told the silent room of soldiers. I thought I was tough because I could scare people. Then I met Staff Sergeant Anderson, who showed me what real strength looks like. He paused, his voice growing serious. He could have seriously hurt us that night. Instead, he gave us a chance to change. Sheriff Wilson stepped forward next. Since that night, our county's crime rate has dropped by 60%. The gas station that was once a trouble spot is now a community center. Former troublemakers are now community leaders, all because one soldier remembered that his training was about protecting people, not hurting them. Mike then shared something he hadn't told anyone before. That night, when I walked into that bathroom, I wasn't thinking about fighting. I was remembering my surgeon's words from basic training. The strongest warrior is the one who knows when not to strike. The presentation included photos of the transformed gas station area, the new community center built next door, the mentoring program for troubled youth, and the veteran support group that Big Jake now helped lead. The young soldiers watched intently as they saw how one incident had created a ripple effect of positive change. After the presentation, a young private raised his hand. "Sir, what's the most important lesson we should learn from this?" Mike thought for a moment before answering. "The most powerful weapon we have isn't in our hands, it's in our hearts and minds. Every situation is an opportunity to either escalate or educate. Choose wisely." Later that evening, Mike, Big Jake, and Sheriff Wilson sat in the base cafeteria, sharing coffee and reflecting on the year's events. Mr. Johnson had sent fresh cookies from the gas station's new bakery section, which had become famous in the county. "You know what's funny?" Big Jake said, "My son Tommy is now thinking about joining the military. Says he wants to help people like you did, Mike." Sheriff Wilson added, "And 3 other young people from our town have enlisted this year. They say they want to learn the same values they saw in that video." As they talked, Colonel Roberts joined them with some surprising news. The military was planning to use their story as part of a new training program about community engagement and responsible use of combat training. "What happened that night is becoming a template," the colonel explained. "It's teaching soldiers that true strength isn't about domination, it's about transformation." As the evening ended, Mike walked his guests to their cars. The night was clear and cool, reminiscent of that fateful evening a year ago. Before leaving, Big Jake turned to Mike one last time. "My old biker vest still hangs in my closet," he said. "I keep it there to remind me of who I was and who I chose to become. Every morning, I look at it and thank God for sending a soldier who knew how to fight but chose to teach instead." Mike watched them drive away, thinking about how a simple gas station stop had turned into something that would impact generations to come. He remembered his training instructor's words from years ago. Sometimes the biggest victories come from the battles we choose not to fight.